Get 6 months of local news for just $2. You get unlimited access to the news and information you need to stay connected to your community. Visit inforum.com/subscribe to get 6 months of local news for just $2.
You're listening to Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. I'm your host, Rob Port. If I sound distracted, it's because I've been busy covering this story all morning. I'm joined by my co-host, Chad Oban.
He's right of center, I'm left of center, both sides of the political spectrum.
I think it's cathartic. I think it's a necessary and proper debate. I'm glad we're having it.
And honestly, we have to do better.
Okay, I don't know why I'm getting blamed for this, right? Welcome to Plain Talk, where a little bit of an unusual show. Normally, as guests who come on the show know, and you know, we mentioned from time to time when we're razzing him during the recording, Matt Fern is our producer. Matt does a great job, elevates our audio quality, just does a really good job on the show. But before Matt was our producer on Plain Talk, he was a friend of mine. Known him for 10 years. He's a filmmaker. I participated in some of his past projects. Notably, he interviewed me for his documentary about the Fighting Sioux logo controversy. And Matt, obviously being a filmmaker, has an interest in film grant policy in the state of North Dakota. And so when Matt noticed a problem or an issue or some oddities around some film grants issued by the North Dakota Department of Commerce, funded by the state legislature, he flagged it. And what really made me interesting, because the reason why Matt's our guest today is he's made a podcast about this. And what really interests me in this is obviously the subject matter, which I've reported on as well, you know, pretty extensively. But the role that you know, citizen journalism plays. We spend a lot of time complaining about the content that's on social media and YouTube and how it's promoting things that are false and promoting ignorance and conspiracy theories. But I also got my start using that route. I started a blog back actually before YouTube existed, back when before Facebook and Twitter existed, back when MySpace was barely a thing.
Back in 1927, when Rob Port got his start in journalism.
That's right. No, it was more like 2001. But I was having a lot of fun with a blog, and I was writing, and I got interested in the world around me. And I just thought, you know, if I write about it and use some of my skills and you know, had been working as a private investigator. My father was an investigator. I'd learned some things about accessing public records and the like. I got started, had no idea that, you know, 2+ decades later, it would be my career. So citizen journalism is something that I still think is important, even though there's a lot of chaff with the wheat and social media. But what is not chaff is the work that Matt has been doing on his podcast. It's called the $740,000 Question. It premieres today, and Matt's here to talk with us about it. Matt, how are you?
Good. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Chad. Thanks for fitting me in today.
So you have been passionate about this. You and some of your fellow filmmakers have I mean, you personally have been filing open records requests, gathering information. You've held press conferences. You've asked for answers from multiple state agencies. And I mean, listening to the first episode of your podcast, it's been a frustrating process to get information. And I guess I can concur with that, because I've done some reporting about this as well. The way this grant was handled was not great. But for people who maybe haven't tuned in, maybe they haven't read my reporting, they're not that familiar with it, lay it out. What is the $740,000 question?
Yeah, the $740,000 question was all of the public funds awarded to one video production company in North Dakota, Canonical Productions, by North Dakota Department of Commerce, was that done legally? This first came to my attention in 2023 when the Department of Commerce announced a $600,000 grant had been awarded to Canonical Productions. And when I went to look at the one website that has information about it, I noticed a lot of inconsistencies and a lot of kind of concerning facts about it. Fast forward to, it's been about 2 years since I first found out about this, and not much has changed. The Department of Commerce has repeatedly said this is business as usual, and they did nothing incorrect here. The process in which they've awarded the $600,000 was fair and transparent, is what they were saying. And the additional $140,000 awarded to Canonical in 2017 and 2021 were all above board. And so after 2 years of them kind of saying the same thing and not getting much response from the Attorney General or from the Burgum administration's governor office, I decided to make a podcast about this. And I did file an ethics complaint over a year ago about this issue, and that there is an investigation ongoing.
Hey, Matt, first of all, I listened to the first episode this morning. I really encourage people to listen. It's so extremely well done. It's got a good rhythm to it. It's easy to listen to, so I'd encourage people to go out and do that. One of the biggest questions I had, and obviously I didn't follow this as close as you did or Rob did after listening to the first episode, is it does feel like, so the legislature appropriates these $600,000. It doesn't name Canonical, but there's a footnote that says that's who the money should go to. And then the Commerce Department still chooses to do a grant application for 6 days. And it's my understanding the Commerce Department has said, well, the legislative intent was to give it to this firm anyway. Why the hell did the Commerce Department even open it up for 6 days if they're claiming the legislature told them they had to do this based on the legislative footnote?
Well, that's a great question for the Department of Commerce. And from what I've heard from them saying is that was the interpretation they got from the Attorney General. So they consulted the Attorney General's office and they recommended a bidding process. But what I think was different, and I don't know this for sure, I'm not a lawyer, but there were 2 footnotes in the 2021 and 2023. Both of them said all these funds go directly to Canonical Productions. But in 2023, there was an additional sentence after that said the Senate does not agree with this purpose, or something similar to that. And so I wonder if that is really why they chose to have an open bidding process. But I really disagree with it even being called an open bidding process. The grant application requirements, from my perspective, look like they were copy and pasted from Canonical's website. They announced the grant application on a Friday at 4, and Canonical submitted their application 2 days later. So I really don't think this was really fair or transparent at all.
I mean, just from my own reporting, my perception is the reason why they went through what appears to me to be sort of a pro forma process is because of the Constitution's gift clause. We're not allowed, the state of North Dakota is not allowed to just give money to a company that's not through like a contract, a competitive, like a bidding process, something like that. And so I think they conducted my opinion is they conducted a pro forma process to satisfy the gift clause of the Constitution. And
Rob, I would suggest that's even worse. So you make these other filmmakers apply for a grant and spend time on it that they have no chance of getting.
These are small business. I mean, my perception is a lot of these are small business people, people who are, or people who are doing this on the side of their main career, who probably don't have a lot of time to spend, 4 or 5 hours or whatever the amount of time it takes to submit a grant application, only to find out, they were probably they were almost certainly never going to get it in the first place. And Matt, that was what first drew me to this story, because to me that just seems so egregious. The timing for that grant application from the Commerce Department was they dropped it on Friday afternoon/evening. I'm forgetting the specific time.
It was around 4:00.
Yeah, late in the day on a Friday, which is not typically, right? That's the stereotypical Friday news dump. That's not normally when you put out news that you want a lot of people to pay attention to. And then I think the entire period lasted 10 days, 6 of which were business days, if I'm remembering right. That to me, when I first looked at that, that's what first set off red flags for me. Like, if you really intended this to be competitive, why not take a month? Now, the auditor actually went through, because State Auditor Josh Gallion's office took a look at this. They went through, they looked at other grant application processes run by the Commerce Department, and what they found was this was far shorter than the average period that the Commerce Department typically does.
Yeah. And I do appreciate the auditor's office actually answering our questions and responding to this. Unfortunately, their concerns, I felt, really were not heard, because the Department of Commerce really pushed back at that claim. They said that, they had to have a short time period, so whoever was awarded the grant money had the most amount of time to complete their projects. And that doesn't make sense to me. I feel like their job should be to, allocate those taxpayer dollars properly, rather than give an advantage to whoever gets it. But also, it is kind of funny because, now this has been 2 years later. The Commerce's whole argument was that they had to have a short grant application window so the applicant could complete their project before the end of the biennium and submit a final report on June 30th, 2025. Yet, Canonical has not completed either of the films and has not, from my understanding, from what I can tell, met any of the grant requirements that they agreed to when receiving $600,000.
I think it's probably safe to assume there's no clawback in these grants either, where they have to pay back that money if they don't deliver in a timely manner.
Well, there is a clause where they can request an audit of the money. And I really think that would be helpful to know, because what is in that final report is very vague and unclear of how that money was spent. There's also concerning expenses, on there. There's a list of legal expenses for $8,000. There's a $500 music video expense. And also, all these expenses listed have no receipts. So how do we know they're even real, or they were within that time frame, or for the projects requested? But I did reach out to the North Dakota tourism director, who signed the grant agreement 2 weeks ago, and asked, will you be requesting an audit? And was this program a success? And she said, no, they will not be requesting an audit. And yes, this program was a success, which is, I think, ridiculous, because they didn't complete a single thing in the grant agreement, from what I can tell.
So Matt, the Commerce Department is ultimately reportable to the governor. And in this morning's episode, or the first episode, you talked about your correspondence with the Burgum administration, or maybe it's not correspondence because it's sort of one-way communication. You also pointed out that Doug Burgum was pretty busy running for president at that time, so maybe he had other focuses. But ultimately, the Commerce Department reports to the governor. I mean, it's a position of cabinet. Can you talk a little bit about your interactions with the Burgum office or lack of response from the Burgum office?
Well, our filmmaker group, and again, this is not just me here. When I first heard about this, I reached out to every filmmaker I knew in the state, and no one knew anything about this. Everyone was shocked. I did get 27 filmmakers to work on the letter together. There's a lot more that work behind the scenes, but a lot of them do work with the Department of Commerce or the state of North Dakota. And so they were afraid of putting their name out there. And we submitted that letter to Governor Burgum, and we didn't get a direct response for over 11 months. When finally they did agree to meet, they really said there's nothing we can do. That's from what I heard. And we actually get into that a lot in episode 2 of their response, or their lack of response. We also did reach out to the North Dakota Attorney General, as well as the state auditor, state procurement office. State procurement office right away said, nothing we can do. This is out of our jurisdiction. Auditor's office said they'll look into it, which Rob just talked about. They did report inconsistency. And the Attorney General took over 8 months to finally respond. And they said, quote, "Thank you for your concern on this issue. The Attorney General's office does not have the authority to conduct the investigation you are requesting. Questions regarding the award of funds should be directed to the Department of Commerce," which is the agency we're concerned about, "or the state auditor's office." whom we did reach out to, and their concerns went nowhere. I reached out to the Attorney General again 2 weeks ago, asking if the Attorney General doesn't have the authority to investigate this, who does? And why does it take 8 months for you to say, you can't do anything?
One of the really interesting things about this is how I imagine that some people listening to this may have opinions about whether or not the state of North Dakota should be funding film grants. And I want to say that this isn't really about, that's a good debate to have. We can have that debate. I'm not discounting anybody's opinion on that, but that's a separate question. What's before us is the reality that the state of North Dakota did spend this money this way. This was approved by the legislature, was distributed by the Commerce Department through a bidding process, the flaws of which we have already extolled. The thing is we did do this, and it was done this way, and that is the issue before us. So it's not like throw up your hands, well, we shouldn't be doing film grants anyway. This is how they chose to spend this money, and I think what's been revealed is very problematic. And then even beyond that, Matt, I feel like this is related to some other things that have been going on in the state of North Dakota government. When we look at, for instance, in the Ray Holmberg matter, and the question of how so much of his travel got approved, going all over the place, a lot of times of very dubious value to North Dakota taxpayers. I see a lot of parallels between this and that. And which is not to insinuate like a conspiracy or, some of the other nonsense we're hearing about pedophile. I mean, it's not really that. It's just sort of a very, I want to say, lackadaisical and often self-serving approach to using taxpayer funds, taxpayer resources. And that was really something when you told me that you had gone to the Commerce Department and they said that they were satisfied that this was a success. I'm thinking to myself, what did the state of North Dakota, what did the taxpayers get from this? There are no films, although in fairness, he's saying that they plan on releasing them in the future. So I guess we'll see if that happens. But as of now, there's no films that have been produced. But also like what the state of North Dakota got was we got some stock footage from the production, I guess. I looked at it, right? The Commerce Department shared, had shared drives of what they got, and they were like some behind the scene photos, some of which were very grainy. I am very skeptical that has $700,000 worth of, or 600,000, or whatever the number is, worth of value to the taxpayers of North Dakota. And so I'm just, that to me was one of the most frustrating parts of all this, is like, well, we got value. This was a success. If this is what we're defining as a success, I don't want to do film grants anymore. I'm sorry. That wasn't really a question. That was more of a statement. But I mean, for you, filmmaker, you as a filmmaker have got to be thinking, I want film grants. I want this to flourish and I want to do it right. But the way this has gone has probably produced that attitude in a lot of taxpayers.
Yeah. And I do think, and it should be no surprise, that these film grants are a great idea. I think they have a lot of benefit to the state of North Dakota. I think the actual intent is a great intent to increase tourism, increase these professional opportunities for other media professionals in the state is incredible. But the fact that the state has nothing to show for the $600,000 should be absolutely no surprise to anyone, because they've already done this before. In 2021, the exact same name of the grant, they gave $100,000 to Canonical Productions. And I've asked, what do you have to show for it? What are the results of the grant? And they got nothing. And I asked, did you guys consider the fact, when you're looking at Canonical's application for $600,000, did you consider the $100,000 you just gave Canonical at all and got nothing in return? And the North Dakota tourism director said no. That was not a consideration. And that is also why our group of filmmakers did speak out 2 years ago, because we saw this coming, because this already happened twice, with $100,000 in 2021 with nothing to show for it, and very little to show for $40,000 in 2017.
Well, and Matt, it's not just you saying they have nothing to show for it. I mean, in the first episode, you have actual audio the Commerce Department head and the tourism director is saying their report on that $100,000 grant is we spent the money. Full stop. That's the full report is we spent the money.
Yeah, they keep saying the money had been expended, is what they kept saying, which is very frustrating.
That's
So I want to talk. Oh, go ahead, Rob.
Suspiciously like stimulus spending, right? Like when the whole problem was like, well, we'll just spend government money and it'll stimulate the economy. I'm dubious as to that policy.
And this is nothing new. These film grants, we are surrounded by incredible film grant opportunities up in Canada, in Minnesota and Montana, and I
should clarify my comment earlier. Like I'm not against this concept at all. And in fact, some of the projects pitched by Canonical, one was that this grant was intended to fund was a story. It was a movie about Hazel, the story of the Hazel Minor incident. North Dakotans are familiar with that. The other was about Medora, the namesake of the city of Medora. These sound like very interesting projects. I mean, these are things that I would like to see done well. But the problem is the process behind this is stunk.
I agree. And Canonical needs to be transparent on what the state got out of these investments so other filmmakers can learn from it. Because, what do we do for other filmmakers? If a filmmaker asks me, hey, how do you get support from the state of North Dakota? How do you be a filmmaker in North Dakota? And right now it's like, well, you got to hide a couple footnotes and make sure everyone keeps quiet.
Man, I want to talk about the footnotes really quick. I know in the episode you talked to Rob about the fact that, the footnotes are unique, but not really that unique. One of the things I thought was interesting is I've been involved in my real life with lawsuits involving legislative intent. So often you'll go back to hearings in a court case or whatever, or they'll put in these footnotes. What I thought was most interesting about this footnote is that you couldn't find out who put the footnote in that this money was supposed to go to Canonical. Can you talk about what you did to find out who put in that footnote and ultimately how you found out, Rob Port, where the footnote came from?
Yeah, I thought that would be pretty easy to figure out. And so I asked the North Dakota Department of Commerce, the Burgum administration, the Legislative Council, who are the lawyers for the lawmakers, the North Dakota State Auditor. I asked them all, and none of them could tell me where that came from. And so I thought that's concerning. Did someone hack into the system? Did someone rogue add that in? But if you go and watch the floor comments from Senator Beckendahl and Representative Mike Nathy, it's pretty clear that they had Canonical in mind from the beginning, despite even saying it's an open grant process. And so I did reach out to Rob and as many people as I could in the press to try to get some answers. And I did hear rumblings on who added the footnotes, but I really had no actual concrete proof until I noticed that Rob Port had actually written that, who authored both of the footnotes in one of his articles.
Yeah. Well, I talked to a lot of people down at the legislature, and let's just say that's who they told me wrote it. And it's
let's name names, guys. Who was it?
It was Representative Bob Martinson, is what I was told. Now, the problem, though, is that should be a matter of public record. There should be somewhere where you can go and somebody added the amendment that contained that language. And Chad, I think you know as well as I do, although our legislature has made great strides towards transparency, the cameras in the committee rooms, and Matt certainly made great use of a lot of that for his podcast. One of the great weaknesses right now is the amendment process, where it is a nightmare to track. I rely on lawmakers who are in the chamber telling me, who's bringing these amendments. Sometimes they'll show up as testimony, but not always. And sometimes what gets reported there is just, it might be a formally drafted amendment. It might be a memo or an email or something. It's very informal. It's not tracked well. And as we see from this incident, it behooves the public to be able to know who adds these footnotes, because sometimes they come back and they're very, very important.
Yeah, I think especially in the appropriations process, Rob, the amendments, it's like they're in conference committee or whatever, and they're just sort of throwing paper around, and all of a sudden there's $600,000 that's earmarked for somebody. That's not good for transparency. But so I asked about the footnote. The third episode, I mean, these episodes, you in the press release, you name these episodes. I believe today's was called Department of Incompetence. The second episode is no comment. And the third one is Bob and Dan. Who are Bob and Dan?
Bob is Representative Bob Martinson, and Dan is the founder of Canonical Productions, Dan Belinsky. And from all the research I've done, those two seem to know the very most about this film grant process. However, both of them, I can't really find them talking about this at all. North Dakota Monitor, Fargo Forum, Bismarck Tribune, Minot Daily News all reached out to Canonical Productions. Dan Belinsky have yet to get any comment back.
Well, the episodes, you could find them. The first one is up on YouTube. It's the $740,000 question. We're also going to have the episodes popping up in the Plain Talk feed. So if you're already subscribed to this podcast on Spotify or Apple or wherever you get your podcasts, we're everywhere. You'll be able to have the episodes there. And like I said, on YouTube, the first one's out today. So by the time you listen to this, it'll be out and available for you. And then they'll be on the next 2 Fridays. New episodes will be released. And it's going to be worthwhile to listen to this. Because again, you may be thinking this is a small amount of money relative to the overall state budget. And you're right. And you may even be thinking, well, the state shouldn't be doing film grants anyway. And, you know, I'm not here to tell you your opinion's wrong or right about that. That's a debate we can have. What this story is really about is how our state government works. And in this instance, it didn't work very well. And I don't think it did much service to the taxpayers. And that's worth shining a light on. So, Matt, congrats. And looking forward to hearing the rest of the episodes.
Good work, Matt.
Thank you, guys. And you can visit filmnorthdakota.com to listen and subscribe to the podcast.
Hey, Plain Talk listeners, have something to say? Call or text Plain Talk with your questions, comments, or headlines you want us to cover.
Just dial 701-587-3141. Leave us your message or shoot us a text with your name and location, and you could be featured on an upcoming show.
Hi, my name is Ashley, and I am in Jamestown.
Hey, Rob and Chad. My name's Tony. I live in Grand Forks.
That's 701-587-3141.
Call us, text us, vent, praise.
We want you in the conversation. Thanks for being part of the show.
Now let's get back to today's episode.
Welcome back. Again, there are a lot of things I like about Matt's story. One, I mean, and obviously I've reported on that story a lot too. So I think it's a legit thing. I've been chasing it for a while as well. I like the citizen journalism aspect of it. I mean, Matt's a filmmaker.
Right.
You know, and this is just something, it was a problem he solved. It touches on an industry he's obviously very, very familiar with. He has some expertise on that front, and he came to it and decided to tell the story. And to me, this is the good side of social media, because now we have things like YouTube. Now we have things like social media where we can tell stories like this. Somebody like Matt can tell this story and get it out there. And that's important. And that really matters.
So, Rob, I think one of the things that's really important about this story is it is just one example, right? I mean, you know, this is something that Matt's passionate about, filmmakers are passionate about, but this is not completely unique. I mean, you reference the sort of Holmberg travel stuff. I mean, the money that was going to Global Bridges, that was a no-bid contract where the legislature was appropriating money to go to Global Bridges, and then legislators were traveling. You know, how many of these things are out there where the legislature winks and nods and says, we know who this money is going to? And I think they might be good ways to spend money, but I think we should be transparent about it. And I think the way the Commerce Department, checked the box to do this 6-day open process or whatever, that's just terrible. And for them to continue to say, oh, this is great, look at all we got for this money. We're a conservative state. We don't like this kind of wasteful money. I mean, I think about other things that money could have been used for to help, pay for meals or, poor kids getting after school care, those kind of things. So it's frustrating to me, and I'm proud of Matt for the work he's doing on this.
And again, I don't want to make it sound like I'm necessarily against the idea of film grants. That's a separate policy
Right.
from this. And just to cite another example, remember the gubernatorial election last year, Tammy Miller's lieutenant governor candidate was at the time the head of the Commerce Department. And what was found during that he had grants that were there were grants coming out of the Commerce Department that were going to entities and businesses that his family had involvement in, that he had involvement in. And it's just one thing I found in doing that reporting is how many of these, like we have all these little grant programs that there are not many people who follow North Dakota politics as closely as I do. And some of these programs I'm hearing about for the first time. Like what is this? Or maybe I've heard about them before and just wasn't aware of them. How many of these, they're holding public meetings, but how many people are there? And there's so many of them. How do you get reporters in every room? How do you scrutinize it? It's usually not. Usually we don't find out that something's gone wrong until after the fact. The money's out the door and something went wrong, and then we're reporting about it after the fact. There's just a lot. There's a lot going on.
And I think it's the appropriations process, and I don't have an answer for it, but even funding science centers, which I support, the Bison World conversations, some of the extra $50 million to the presidential library that just sort of got slipped into an appropriations bill at the end without like a public hearing. There's conversation about it. It's just sort of these appropriations that go in at the end. A lot of them should be their standalone bills for us to talk about these things rather than just a small group of people that are making these decisions.
Flipping something in and then creating a situation where if you don't like it, I now have to jeopardize this larger budget that does a lot of important things, and that maybe even the legislature is constitutionally obligated to pass. It's a choice between that or creating a fight over that one line item, and that gets tough, especially when you think of the clock ticking. North Dakotans like to have a very constrained legislature. They only have 80 days. Well, when you're down in it, in the nitty gritty, are you going to be the one who stands up and say, oh no, I want to have another, multiple days of committee hearings about this line item? There's a lot of pressure on you to not do that.
You become Glenn Koppelman, right? that's what Koppelman essentially did with the Commerce Department. The frustration was he did it multiple times on the same stuff. But your point about what does this $600,000 mean for future appropriations for film grants? If you're Matt and all these other filmmakers who I guarantee would like more grants from the state to make films like we see in Montana and Minnesota and other places, this jeopardizes any appropriations moving forward because this wasn't done above board.
And that becomes kind of the omerta part of it, right? Like, okay, even if you have a problem with this, if you speak out, you put at risk. The politicians may throw up their hands and say, okay, well, then we're not doing any film grants anymore.
And Matt alluded to the fact that there's some filmmakers who didn't sign onto the letter because they have other grants and they don't want to put those other grants at risk. Well, that's also not good government if you can't speak up without losing other things that you're qualified for. So again, Matt's standing up to the man here a little bit, and I always get a kick out of when people are willing to stand up for what they believe in.
Exactly. So great podcast. Like we said, the episodes will be here on Plain Talk. Also on it'll be in the Plain Talk feed, and then you'll also be on YouTube. $740,000 question.
And again, the first episode was great. It was easy listening, 30 minutes. Check it out.
No, it's not. It's not down in the weeds. It's very good narrative, as you would expect from filmmaker. Yeah. He does a great job of bringing you through with the narrative. It's got sound bites, very high production value.
There was just one little lull in the middle of it when you talk to this port guy. For about 5 minutes.
You could fast forward through that part. Okay. So what else do we want to talk about? I wrote a little bit about Senator John Hoeven making what I perceived to be an interesting maneuver. Now, at risk of reading too much into it, he signed on to a letter. He was one of 10 Republicans to sign on to a letter objecting to the Trump administration freezing what is it, $6.8 billion nationally of education funds that I think redounds to about 24.5 million, I think is the number, something like that.
I think it's north of 26, just north of 26
Okay.
million.
Tens of millions of dollars in funding for North Dakota after school programs. He objected to it. And to me, that was very interesting and was a tacit admission that what the Republicans are doing, whether it's the Build Back Better bill or some of the other government through chaos that the Trump administration is pushing, Hoeven is a very smart politician. And I got some pushback. That was sort of the premise of my column. And I'll be honest with you, when I'm trying to figure out which way the political winds are blowing, I look at people like John Hoeven because he is about as reliable a weather vane in politics as you're going to get. The man knows what he's doing. Yeah. Now, I know when I wrote that, I had some liberals and some progressives on my Facebook feed like, oh, he's an empty suit. He doesn't know. I'm sorry. The man has never lost an election in North Dakota. I think there's only been one election that he didn't win by a landslide, and that was the first one for governor against Heidi Heitkamp. It's a very interesting thing. I thought it was interesting because the political risk, like you do the calculus, there is risk in pushing back against anything on the Trump administration because you don't know if that guy's going to single you out on social media. All of a sudden, he turns the mega media universe against you, and now you're Tom Tillis, right? That's right. But I think Hoeven's calculus, and this is just me I haven't spoken to him. This is just me on the outside looking in. I think Hoeven's calculus is that the political risk of not aligning yourself against some of these more chaotic decisions that the Trump administration is making is greater. So I thought it was a very interesting position he took.
Okay. Well, listen, first of all, I'd like to say thank you to John Hoeven for signing on to this letter. I mean, this is something that it did take some courage for him to do. And frankly, it's sort of the fact that the dollars were frozen in the first place is just politically stupid to me. And so the fact that John Hoeven signed on to this letter shows how stupid it is.
And I want to be very distinct about, we can have a debate about whether or not we should continue spending this money going forward.
But this is money that was already allocated.
Already appropriated, that they're now clawing back at a time when all sorts of programs, all sorts of groups, the Boys and Girls Club was a big one called out in the media, all across the state. These programs serve thousands of families. There's another school year looming, and all of a sudden the rug's pulled out from under them. Right. That's bad policy and bad politics.
Yeah, and John Hoeven knows that there's people who are upset about this money being frozen. There's not a lot of constituency on the other side that's saying, freeze that money, keep it away from the kids. He also, so good for him, because it's not easy to stand out, against Trump. I don't think it's a Tom Tillis situation, though, right? Because Tom Tillis was out there by himself. Hoeven's on this letter with 10 other Republicans, so there's some protection there. But I will say one thing about John Hoeven, and my liberal friends, I'm sorry, the dude is really good at politics. There's a reason why he gets 75% of the vote. I'm not saying that necessarily John Hoeven is voting right on things or that he's leading on things, but the guy can weather vane's a very good way of putting it. There's a reason why this guy's as popular as he is, because he can sort of see the politics behind this thing. It doesn't justify his vote for the big, beautiful bill. It doesn't justify him supporting Trump. On this thing, he did the right thing, and it was a courageous thing in this political environment to sign on to this letter. I also, when I saw that he signed on to the letter, my first thought was, knowing that, Hoeven is real good at this stuff, does he know something? Like, does he know this money's already being unfrozen at some point in the near future? And he signed on the letter. Now he's going to be able to say, look what I did. We'll see how that plays out. But,
and that doesn't undermine.
No,
it doesn't undermine the credit he gets for signing on the letter.
No. And progressive friends,
his motivation.
It's okay to thank somebody you disagree with for doing the right thing. And it's okay to recognize their talent. I would also say, if John Hoeven is terrible at politics and he keeps getting 75 to 80% of the vote, what does that say about us on the left?
Yeah. Well, it says something probably not very flattering.
Yes. So but guess what? He's great at politics.
And the other thing I think that ignores when you say that John Hoeven is not good at politics or you want to sort of take that position, what you're ignoring is that the reason why he's winning that is because North Dakota voters are voted for him.
Right.
And because for the most part, John Hoeven is giving most of them what they want out of the United States senator. And that is a reality that you have to come to grips with. You don't like that he voted for the bill, for the big, beautiful bill. You don't like that he supports Donald Trump. Okay, this is a state where 60% plus of North Dakotans voted for Donald Trump. You know, you have to come to grips with that reality. And instead of just being upset that they're supporting Trump, you have to ask yourself, well, why are they supporting Trump? And what can we do to persuade them to believe that that's the wrong idea? There's not enough Democrats doing that right now.
And I also think it does a disservice to John Hoeven, like almost the suggestion, the empty suit sort of thing. I mean, that's been something we've been hearing for decades in North Dakota. He actually is he's good on, like, he understands policy. If you talk to him, he understands policy. And I think in Washington, do I wish that he was more like Lisa Murkowski? And he was number 51, 52, 53 in that, the swing. Yes. But he's also reasonable, and he's delivered, and he continuously delivers for North Dakota because of his seniority, because of the system that we live in. And we might not like that, but it's the reality.
And also he does the little things great. I mean, the small ball stuff, constituent services, his operation is first rate. I hear from people all the time. They have a problem with the VA. They have a problem with this or that. And I'm working with somebody from Senator Hoeven's office, and they're really helping me. I don't think people understand how powerful that is. So when you come out and all of a sudden Hoeven's opponent is saying, well, he's a do-nothing, he's ignoring North Dakotans. No, he's not. No,
Rob, that's why Camp Byron and Earl got elected for as long as they did in North Dakota, because they were really good at constituent services as well. And I think John Hoeven learned from that to a certain extent. That's how so again, I want to compliment John Hoeven for signing onto this letter. It's not easy. It's the right thing to do. I wish our other senator might have signed on to that letter too. I noticed both Republicans from West Virginia were on that letter. Would have been nice if both senators from North Dakota were on that letter. But Hoeven and Kramer are also very, very different in terms of standing up to the administration and their styles.
Yeah, Kramer's got his own style, which clearly works for him as well.
Right.
But let's talk a little bit about what Hoeven's maneuvering pretend. Because what I'm looking at is, I mean, the polling on the big, beautiful bill is atrocious. And maybe that's a product of when you group so many different things into one gigantic bill, it's kind of a situation where everybody finds something to hate. So the polling on it, though, is atrocious. And when I look at the way, the delegation sort of responding, I think they know that there's some risk there, that the public's going to turn on this. Now, I don't know that there's going to be a big wave in North Dakota where all of a sudden Democrats are going to start winning on the statewide ballot. I think that's unlikely. But nationally, I mean, if we held the election today, I think Republicans lose in the midterms big. I mean, I think they would lose big. Now, it's a long ways to go to election day next year, but that's the direction the winds are blowing right now.
Yeah, I think a couple things. First, on the national front, I don't know that I saw some polling earlier this week, I can't even remember who did it, that Democrats on the generic ballot aren't as ahead as much in the congressional generic ballot as they have been in previous sort of wave elections. So, I mean, history shows us that Democrats should do well at this point in a presidency of the opposite party. But I'm cynical always about
we are through the looking glass in the Trump era. So all the old
exactly
all the old standbys just aren't as relevant anymore.
But I also think in terms of local and the big bill, there's an op-ed in the Bismarck Tribune today by Ron Ness and Doug Goring talking about how great it is for oil and ag and big ag. I mean, it was strange to me they would have used the ag commissioner rather than the head of some sort of farm group to sign on with Ron Ness talking about how good this is, which leads me to believe that there's some farm groups that aren't so sure that this is as great for them. And I think you wrote the column about, is it tone deaf to have big oil, which we both support? We know that it pays for our schools and keeps our taxes low. But having them out saying how great this is for them while people are losing their health insurance, I'm not sure how that plays.
Right. I believe Ron Ness when he says it's great for his industry.
Yeah.
Why
So do I.
And I also don't have a problem with it being great for that industry. I don't have a problem with it being great for the ag industry either. You're talking about the bulk of North Dakota's economy in those two industries. So I don't have a problem with the bill being good for them. I'm not like, oh, this is just a handout to big oil. That's not my argument. Right. I don't think it's a handout to big oil. And I think it's good policy as far as those industries are concerned. I think the politics of it, though, the optics of standing at the Petroleum Council's headquarters next to representatives from the coal industry and the oil and gas industry, and then having to answer questions about how this is tough sledding for rural hospitals,
right,
and things like that is tough. Now, in fairness, North Dakota doesn't have a provider tax, so that part of the Medicaid bill doesn't really apply to North Dakota, but still you have representatives from North Dakota rural hospitals who are out there being quoted in the press saying, this is not good for us.
Yeah. I mean, we've had in the last couple of weeks, you've had rural hospitals, you've had the ARC, which represents folks with disabilities. You've had some of our tribal communities come out with like the list of the concerns that they have. I also think it's telling that most of these Medicaid cuts or slow down of spending, I don't want to get into that again about if it's cuts or slow down of spending, don't go into effect until after the midterm election, right? So if you are proud of these cuts and you think they're good and helpful and everybody's going to love them, wouldn't you want to implement them right now?
Let's be honest.
And I've heard some Republicans say, well, we want to make sure people have time to implement it. Well, that hasn't exactly been the style of this administration up to this point, is to give people time to implement things.
And in fairness, no spending cuts are ever politically popular. Well, rarely. It's usually dumb stuff like foreign aid everybody gets behind, and that's a rounding error in the budget. We get super hyped up about cutting funding for public broadcasting. And don't get me wrong, I love my friends at Prairie Public, but maybe it really is time. I don't know. But also,
I'm opposed to that. I want to go on record. I'm opposed to cutting PBS.
Okay, fair enough. We can have a debate about that, but I mean, we are not balancing the budget on the backs of cuts like that. And the problem is every form of federal spending has a constituency for it. So no cuts were ever going to be popular. But I'm worried that by delaying the cuts in the big, beautiful bill, which justifies, we're bending the curve on the national debt and deficit or whatever they're spending. Okay, if you actually follow through on the cuts, because that's what they always do, is like the savings are over a 10-year window. And so a lot of times what they do is they backload the cuts in the future, and then by the time we get there, we don't do them. Right. That's a very old political playbook. And the thing is Trump was bringing all this change, and he's draining the swamp, and he's doing all these things, but we're using the same tactics we ever use to avoid fiscal responsibility.
But Rob, even if they implement everything, it's still increasing the deficit.
Yeah. Even by their own math.
Yeah. The trifecta of conservative leadership in Washington continues to increase the deficit and debt.
Yeah.
Well, taking health insurance away from people. I mean, kudos, I guess.
Yeah, your government's going to cost the same, but you're going to get less.
Yeah,
that's a great deal for the taxpayers. And again, I'm ready for some pain. If not now, then when? I'm for it, but the thing is it has to be in pursuit of real outcomes. And if it's not in pursuit of real outcomes, then what are we doing? Are we just being mean to people?
I don't. Rob, you and I leading the charge to tax the rich is exactly what this country needs right now.
Yeah, I think Elon Musk can pay some more.
Yeah.
I like Social Security, for instance. I think we could raise the cap. I think there are rich people out there that don't need to be capped on what they're contributing to Social Security.
So on that subject, doesn't that seem like a politically easy thing to do? To raise the cap on Social Security tax, and we're not talking like it doesn't even just raising it $50,000 or $100,000 or something.
But like $150,000 now, I think.
Yeah, and it hasn't gone up forever.
The change of the direct trajectory for the health of Social Security, that even moving it up to like $500,000, which just means that you have to pay your Social Security tax on up to $500,000 of your income. Yep. Like we're not taking $500,000 away.
Right.
You just have to pay. I mean, that's what it is you only have to pay Social Security taxes on your first $125,000 of income. Just raise it up to $500,000.
Look at what we just did. To me, it's a politically no-brainer for that to be done. And I know some people say, well, it doesn't actually do that much. Well, it does something. Let's move the needle in the right direction for once.
Yeah. I mean, if we're going to have Social Security the way it stands now, then that's what you have to do to fix it. Yep. We could talk about what Social Security should be changed to, but that's a non-starter with the public. The public doesn't want that. So if this is what they want, then we have to pay for it. Right. You know, I'm so far beyond, Chad, like having debates about even what the policy should be. I'm just down. Okay, if we want what we're doing now, we have to pay for it. Right. So that means we either have to cut other things or we have to raise taxes. That's where I'm at as a conservative right now. I'm not even willing to have a debate about what the policy is. If this is the policy we're going to have, we have got to pay for it.
And we need to be honest with people, right? If you want your 1 acre in North Bismarck with more streets and all that other stuff, it's going to cost more to have police and fire and all those other things, and it's going to cost more property taxes.
I know we didn't have this on our list to talk about, but I actually just wrote a column before the show about the city of Fargo. And, you know, of course, they're doing what a lot of local governments are, and it's a parade of horribles that the 3% cap that the legislature passed. Oh, you know, we can't live with it. Here in Minot, they're threatening fire protection, and all our home insurance is going to go up because of this 3% cap. Because if they can't add $1.2 million to the budget every 2-year budget cycle, then everything's lost. And so I went to the city of Fargo. The city of Fargo has a tax exemption for it's a 2-year exemption for new construction, single family primary residence homes. And it's like 150,000, 125,000, somewhere in that ballpark. I just wrote it. You think I would remember the dollar figure, but it's in that ballpark. I did the math on it. Like I went back and looked up the number of building permits that they issued in 2023 and 2024. And I did the math with their mills and everything. That's about a $2,000 exemption, you know, reduction in the property tax bill for the first two years of these ownerships. That's great for developers and real estate agents. It allows them to move their inventory. It allows them to do all that development on the edge of town. That means we got to pay for more lane miles for garbage trucks and snow plows and maintaining the roads and more street lights and all those other things that the city's obliged, police protection, fire protection, that the city's obliged to provide. But then after 2 years, the homeowner sees an increase in their property tax bill. And then meanwhile, the city's giving away, and the number, I think it was like $1.6 million a year. The city's budget shortfall, they're saying right now, is $6.8 million. That's almost 20%. Like you just eliminate that one exemption. That is 20% of your budget shortfall solved.
And I'm not a city planner, Rob, but to give a tax cut to somebody who's then adding more expenses to the city doesn't seem like a good return on investment.
Well, because it's a rolling thing, right? I mean, they're building new homes all the time, so there's always homes that are in that 2-year exemption period. So you're narrowing the tax base, but increasing the amount of services that have to be supported by that tax base. No wonder people are mad about their property taxes. Stop.
Guess what? Nobody's building infill in the core of cities. Everybody's building on the outsides of town. So, yeah, you know, and I think Fargo, you know, it's a growing community. It's complicated, their finances, but I don't think the 3% is the start of their financial issues in the city of Fargo. I think they've got some problems that they need to deal with. I mean, but the idea of, I hadn't heard the Minot thing until you just brought it up here, but you know, it's always, it's no different than Measure 4. We're talking about fire, right? We're talking about police. We got rid of property taxes. You're going to lose your schools. I mean, that's sort of what you do, but let's give it some time. Let's try to make a year work before we start say this.
And that's the thing that worries me is that I think some of these, they don't want it to work. And I think that they're going to drag their feet and try to make this process as tortuous as possible rather than, you know, maybe do the good reforms that are going to address this. Let's say before I had to go, you know, last night, Mike Pence, by the way, this Epstein stuff at the national level, the thing is, it's a horrific story. I mean, he victimized hundreds, thousands of girls. I don't even know what the number is. An extraordinary amount of human beings were damaged by this man and whoever it was that was attending all his parties and everything. The list of which we're not really allowed to know.
But it might be the current president. It might be President Clinton. I mean, there's so many people who've been rumored to be on these lists.
Well, and some of them were there. I mean, some of them had their pictures taken, and it's just hard to know. Did Bill Gates just show up at the same cocktail party and all his dealings with Epstein were above board, or was he? I have no idea. I don't know. And I don't want to be a conspiracy. Anyway, Mike Pence came out and joined the call for the Trump administration to release the records. Mike Pence, whose life was put at risk by Donald Trump's January 6th riot. In the comment section, this was posted by KX News. In the Facebook comment section, I saw a familiar name pop up. I don't know why I was reading the Facebook comments on this thread, but I was just interested in how people were reacting to it. And not surprisingly, people didn't have very nice things to say about Mike Pence calling for transparency on the Epstein files. But in amongst there was Representative Lori Van Winkle. And this amused.
Here we go.
Somebody commented, his mask looks very tight. Now, Chad, if you were a student, an aficionado of American conspiracy theories, you know what that's a reference to. That is the.
Well, I didn't until you told me earlier today.
I used to listen to Art Bell at night. When I worked on the road, and so I'd be driving late at night. Art Bell, Coast to Coast. I loved conspiracy theory, the reptilians, all this stuff. I didn't believe any of it, but it was like good science fiction kind of, right? Like it's entertaining to listen to. It was a lot more fun back when it was like harmless late night talk radio and not something the president of the United States believes. Anyway, one of the various conspiracy theories that is central to like QAnon in a lot of like the sort of mega right stuff is the idea of reptilians, which comes from a gentleman there, the name of David Icke. He's a Holocaust denier, anti-Semite, disgusting person. They believe that the world's elites, some of them are reptilians, that they're aliens and they're reptiles and they wear masks to protect them. And so this person on Facebook says his mask looks very tight. Representative Van Winkle then replies saying, "I'm waiting for the great unmasking of all." Now, maybe I'm reading too much into this, but I'm pretty sure that Representative Representative Van Winkle believes.
Poor Representative Doctor.
Terrible. Representative Jason Doctor has nothing to do with it.
Nothing to do with it.
Representative Lori Van Winkle, I'm pretty sure she believes reptilian conspiracy theories based on this Facebook comment.
And nobody would be surprised if she did.
Nobody would be surprised. Nobody would be surprised. So I saw it and I couldn't help laughing. I thought about writing about it. I thought that might be a little too, I don't know, maybe it's too small ball to write about, but I had to tell somebody about it.
So, yes, going back to the Epstein thing just really quick, House Republicans, including Julie Fedorchak, just release everything on the Epstein thing. Just release everything. Let's be transparent. I don't care if there's Republicans.
I want the names and identifying information of the victims redacted. Outside of that, just put it in the public.
Just put it in the public.
And the thing is you like the MAGA people and Donald Trump, you have nobody to blame but yourselves. For years, people talking about this. For years, you were talking about Bill Clinton and Joe Biden and their involvement in it. And maybe they are involved. I don't know. If they are, shame on them. But you release the information. Like you don't get to, now that Trump can't campaign on this and then turn around and be like, oh, it's just shut up already. Who cares about this? It's old news. It's fake news. And by the way, do you see that Wall Street Journal about the card that Donald Trump wrote? And like the little, like it was for Epstein's birthday. Yep. And it was a book of like letters from his friends and stuff. Donald Trump hand drew, allegedly, according to the Wall Street Journal report, although Donald Trump denies it and is now threatening lawsuits. But by the way, the Wall Street Journal, owned by Rupert Murdoch, and had to know that they were going to be threatened with a lawsuit, because I can't even imagine the legal reviews that this article went through. Apparently, this note is a hand-drawn pornographic picture of a woman, and then it's like a fake transcript between Donald and Epstein talking about the secret things that they enjoy together.
Yep.
If that was Joe Biden, Donald Trump would be all over Truth Social. Like, I knew it. I told you the whole time. He's a sicko. That's what Donald Trump would be saying. But because Donald Trump, we're all supposed to look away. It's
well, and some of the people who are saying that it's fake, I think I saw Charlie Kirk say, that's not even the way that Donald Trump speaks. So therefore, he couldn't have written that. The notes. Like,
I like it. Well, one of their first things, like, I don't draw pictures. And then all sorts of pictures, doodles that Donald Trump has written on letters and things on the public record, like within minutes of him saying that, were being reported on.
Release all the information. But I do agree that, this is a total, they did it to themselves. Pam Bondi saying, I've got the list on my desk. And then 6 weeks later.
They invited a bunch of conservative media influencers and gave them binders that said Epstein list on it. And they were all outside the White House, keeping them in the air. You did this. Yep. You created this problem. Now you solve it. Release the records. That's all I got to say.
Yep. All right. I'm glad we finally got to talk about Epstein. I don't think we have up to this point.
I don't think we have. Normally, we don't talk a lot about national stuff. That's
well, let's bring it home. Julia Fedorchak, vote to release the information.
There we go. Absolutely, she should. Okay, we're going to put a pin in it there. Thank you so much for listening to Plain Talk. Please be sure to listen to Matt's podcast, The $740,000 Question. You search on YouTube, you'll find it right now. By the time you listen to this, it'll be in the Plain Talk feed as well. Yeah, thanks for listening. Also, you can go to filmnorthdakota.com. Thanks for the reminder, Matt. Filmnorthdakota.com. That'll take you straight to the YouTube page to find it as well. Easy to find, easy to listen to, and very, very revealing. Good reporting. Thank you for listening. We'll talk again. That's it for today on Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. Plain Talk is a production of Forum Communications Company. Got a question, comment, or suggestion? Leave us a voicemail or send us a text message at 701-587-3141. That's 701-587-3141. If you haven't subscribed to Plain Talk yet, you can find us on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform like Spotify or Apple Podcasts. For those of you who are already hooked, give us a rating or review. And don't forget to share or tell a friend. Special thanks to my co-host Chad Oban, and from myself and everyone at Plain Talk, thanks for listening.
There was just one little lull in the middle of it when you talked to this port guy for about 5 minutes.
You could fast forward through that part.